Hello. RNG. It's random. Or is it? The answer is sometimes. In Peach Monarchs and all Superstar % categories for Mario Superstar and the baseball for the Nintendo GameCube, we must hit a note block. This goal right here. You can see it on my tracker, I think. I think I have it highlighted? Oh no, you guys can't see that. Oh well, whatever. We must hit a note block. Toadette must do this. Now, and this is really annoying because in order to hit the note block, you have to be batting at Peach Garden. There are two ways for Toadette to be batting at Peach Garden. Number one is someone, probably Bowser, recruits Toadette out from under Peach, but does not recruit Peach because recruiting Peach closes off Peach Garden. And then, on a second match, Toadette participates and hits the note block. Peach herself cannot do that, meaning that if that was your only way to complete note block, you would have to do 2 playthroughs in order to finish a run of Peach Monarchs, which means you only have one alternative, and that is to get a Bowser Jr. encounter that allows you to hit the note block at Peach Gardens. Bowser Jr., you fight him at whatever stadium you're closest to on the map. Each of the nodes on the map is associated with one of the stadiums, and the Peach Garden ones have like a particular floor texture that's pretty easy to spot. The problem is that the type of Bowser Jr. encounter that you get is random. Recently, some of the modders, in particular Nooch 17, have looked into how Bowser Jr. encounters work. And basically, at every difficulty level, there's 4 different encounters. 2 of them, you're pitching, and 2 of them, you're batting. In those 2 batting encounters, one of them, you have 1 runner on base, and one of them, you have 0 runners on base already to start with. Although on Mushroom difficulty, that one is actually flipped and you have 2 runners on base. It's weird how that shakes out, but basically, within those 2 batting encounters, one is better than the other, depending on the difficulty level that you're playing with. So that's a problem. If you're doing a Peach Monarchs run and you encounter Bowser Jr. and you get a pitching encounter, you cannot hit the note block. And also, even if you do get the batting encounter, it is very difficult to hit the note block. You are probably going to hit it less than 10% of the time. At least I have never been able to hit it more than 10% of the time, even with lots of practice and deliberate training. So, a setup was originally developed in order to make this easier. First, you put Toadette into the right spot in your lineup, such that she would be batting immediately, because the game basically chooses which batter is going to be batting in your batting encounter against Bowser Jr. based on your lineup as it existed when you saved your game, or it also starts from a pre-initialized value, which is just the characters in their basic order, which for Peach Monarchs is like Peach 1, Daisy 2, Red Toad 3, Blue Toad 4, all the way down to Toadette 8 and Toadsworth 9. That's important. That'll be the default if the first thing that you do is encounter Bowser Jr. Then the game would save. You'd save the game, you'd soft reset, and then you'd go into the file, move into Junior in a particular way, and based on the way that RNG worked, it would produce the same encounter every time. That is because, in this game, the main RNG value that we care about initializes at the number 1. There are 2 to the 32 possible values for this number, but because the game uses one number to generate the next number, it needs a number to treat as the current number before it's actually done a call, and for that purpose, it's 1. So, thank you, Chat Pack, for the subscription. We didn't understand those details in those way with the old setup that relied upon having a save file, but it was basically just figured out through brute force that you could make things line up this way. Of course, at that time, we didn't understand which particular things called RNG and which ones did not. But long story short, now we do understand what calls RNG and what does not. So here's an example of something that calls RNG. That just called RNG 16 times. Here's another example of something that calls RNG. That just called RNG 5 times. And that just did it another 1 time. And then going from minigames mode back to the main menu calls it 1 last time for a total of 7. So the reason that this works is because, like I mentioned earlier, the game uses the RNG value that it is currently using to decide what the RNG value should be next, by doing basically a whole bunch of complicated functions, like just some random math operations that I don't understand and don't care to understand, and it's not really relevant for our purposes. But basically what that means is, the first time that RNG is called in this game, it's going to produce the number 1. The second time that it calls RNG, it's going to produce the number, oh god, what is this? 1,103,527,590. And then the third time that it calls RNG, it's 2,524,885,200. Okay, but we know what these are going to be. So if we know how many RNG calls that we're doing, we know what's going to happen, basically. Now, here's some more examples of things that call RNG that I'm just going to show off for you. We're just going to go into challenge mode here. What I'm doing isn't super important, but... So, Bowser Jr., his movement on the map is random. When it's time for him to move, he will call RNG to decide which direction to move, or you just saw him stand in place. He has a random chance also of staying in place. So, he calls RNG when it's time for him to move. Another thing that calls RNG, and this is something that we did not know, is these guys, Magic Koopa, Koopa, Toad, Pianta, and over there is Shy Guy. These guys call RNG when they get to the end of their walk cycles, basically. It's not really clear why, because their behavior is completely deterministic. They have their, like, intervals that they decide to turn around and walk, and the only reason that those would change is if you get in their way, but they don't exhibit any kind of random behavior when you do that. It's always, like... It's deterministic, trust me on this. I've walked in front of these chumps many, many times. So, yeah. Basically, what we're trying to go for is a butterfly effect, where we start challenge mode with a particular RNG variable, with RNG at a certain value, rather. That value tells Bowser Jr. where he spawns to go towards the Peach Garden area so that we can get the note block encounter as quickly as we can. Now, there's a whole bunch of confounding variables, because every 3 seconds Pianta is calling RNG, and Toad is calling RNG, and Koopa is calling RNG, and they're all, like, at different sort of timings or whatever, so it's not something that we can properly model in advance yet. Maybe we'll get there at some day. But it's more like there's just a lot of noise affecting the random outcomes that basically means that we can only test through trial and error. Like, whether or not this starting RNG value or that starting RNG value is going to lead to the effect of Bowser Jr. walking towards us, which is what we need. But we found a couple of setups to get us what we want, because what we want is to do note block at the start of the run. This is very important because the way that the speedrun is timed is time only begins when you begin the playthrough. So stuff that you do before you begin the playthrough is not timed. It still matters because, like, the game is, like, it has an RNG in its head. It's thinking, I know what the next random event is going to be. It's going to be based on. And it definitely involves the number 1, because that's what it starts at. So, right now, RNG is at the value of 1, and if we go into challenge mode, that's what we're going in with, and it will cause Bowser Jr. to move in this and that sort of way, and it will be completely useless because it turns out that starting with that RNG value does not lead to Bowser Jr. walking towards Peach Garden. He takes like a minute and a half, I think, to eventually get there, and it's just miserable waiting for him for that long. So, as things were going on, and we learned what did and did not advance RNG on the main menu, I did a little bit of trial and error testing on myself, just to see what would happen. And basically what that amounted to was going into this menu, pressing the R button a certain number of times, like say 1 time, and then going into challenge mode and seeing the way that Bowser Jr. would move, with that initial RNG value. One random captain, so advancing RNG 16 times, was not helpful. Neither was 2, or 3, or 4, or 5, but for 6, which is a total of 96 RNG calls, we actually got a pretty good result. I will show you. And you'll see this again if you watch modern Peach Monarchs PvEs, because this is what the current route does. So Bowser Jr. starts sort of like in the Wario section of the map, and you can see the NPCs are moving randomly, but Bowser Jr. is mostly moving to the left. He does one like little back and forth here, but then he fully commits and reaches us. And it's also important what the RNG value is. I want to say at the moment where Bowser Jr. touches you, but that's not quite accurate. There's actually a little bit more time on the map where the random NPCs, or the non-random NPCs, are causing RNG to change anyway, but that's sort of, for lack of a better word, accounted for. Like, and this is just hard to explain, but whatever. What I learned is advancing RNG 96 times, starting challenge mode, and then waiting underneath where the toy field pipe spawns means that Bowser Jr. will come to you fairly quickly and give you this encounter, which is the best kind of encounter, like I was saying. It's home team scenario, which is batting. Scenario 2, which is the third runner in your lineup starts on second base. The fourth runner on your lineup is at bat. That's good because it saves a plate appearance over the other encounter, in which it would be red Toad at bat with no one on base. So just really nice that it worked out this way, and also really nice that that value of 96 increments is pretty quick to reach. You can basically be ready to start your playthrough from power on to like the challenge mode menu in about 30 seconds. Now, there's obviously a little bit of an issue here. In previous versions of the setup, we would reorder our lineup such that Toadette was already fourth in the lineup so that we didn't have to do this batting as the Toads. But as it happens, Toadette is close enough in the lineup to the front that if you do a little bit of batting... Oh, that almost got it. You will be able to get your note block attempt relatively soon after you power on your console. Okay, so that's not a note block. But there you go. Hopefully this is enough for you to get the gist of it. Unfortunately, if you enter like a mini game or a match of baseball, RNG starts advancing so quickly and so many times that we human beings, without like being able to live view the memory of the game, are just not going to have any idea what can happen. And there's no way to change your lineup order without doing something that causes you to lose your hold over RNG. We only can hold RNG for a very, very small amount of time, because basically the only way that we have to reliably set RNG to a value that we know is to turn the console on and off, or to hold B, X, and start, which are the same. Those have the same effect of returning RNG to the initialized value before. And then, as soon as any mini-game or baseball happens, the minip is all over, and we just have to live with what we get. Are the block types variable? What a great question, Nooch! Well, as it happens, there's an extra layer to this, which is my setup, RNG 96, advance RNG 96 times, and then go, and then wait here. Gets us a pretty good Bowser Jr. encounter. It gets us at least the scenario that we want. But, as people who have played this game might not know, in Peach Gardens, there are 16 different total blocks, and they are different types. And I have here a little visual that I created with Nooch's help. So, here you can see. This is the layout of the stadium, and the blocks here are numbered with the numbers that the game gave them. This isn't the numbering that I would give them, but it's the numbering that the game uses, and that's objective and very convenient to have as reference. If we just go with what the game says, it's easier to understand for everybody involved. So this is the map. This is the map of the blocks. So you got 4 different types of blocks. First, you've got the blocks that are perfect for us. Blocks 5, 6, 9, and 10. Those blocks are always note blocks. They're always in the same spot. The ones in front, blocks 6 and 10, are not terrible to hit. They're quite doable. I've hit them plenty of times. 5 and 9 can also be reached. It's not out of reach for Toadette by any stretch, so they're very useful. Those ones are good. Blocks 7, 11, 12, and 14 are always metal blocks, and they always look like metal blocks, and they will never help you, and if you hit them, you just kind of shrug and move on. That's all there is really to say about those blocks. We can basically just ignore them. Then there's blocks 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 8. These blocks are invisible, and all you can see are like faint outlines, you know, like you can see like the little markings, like that indicate the cube of where the cube is sort of in space or whatever. When you start a match of baseball at Peach Gardens, the game looks at a certain value to decide what each of these variable blocks is going to be for that match. It turns out that's the same RNG value that is used to decide Bowser Jr.'s movement and what kind of encounter you get with Bowser Jr. when you encounter him. It's the same RNG value that we've manipulated for other reasons. So, and also, it's deterministic. It's consistent. I guess that's the best way to say it. It's consistent such that you will get the same block generation with the same setup every time. Same as you get the same Bowser Jr. type of encounter with the same setup every time. Last is our blocks 13 and 15, which they have like a Super Mario Bros. 3 horizontally placed brick texture. They are only different from the invisible blocks visually. Functionally, they do the exact same thing of they have a random type that is determined, I think, either shortly before or shortly after the invisible blocks, but it's the same every time. We understand it. So I call blocks 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 13, and 15 the variable blocks, and the other blocks are the invariable blocks because they are always note blocks or metal blocks and never anything else. There is an even 1 in 3 chance for each individual block if you were assuming purely random math, right? A pure 3-sided coin. You flip it and the result is completely fair. It's a 1 in 3 chance that it will be either a note block, which is great, a metal block, which is bad, or a destructible block that breaks into pieces and awards the batter a team star when struck, which is also bad. Those are useless. Those are actually actively bad. For reasons that I'll explain later, maybe. But basically, we just don't want team stars in the note block encounter. They don't help us. They are actively detrimental. So, recently it was discovered, or fully figured out and documented, how to determine what the contents of the variable note blocks are without hitting them. So, we looked at what the values were for my setup that I developed, RNG 96, and with my setup, we know that every single time that you do my setup, blocks 3, 8, and 15 will be note blocks. Blocks 1, 0, 2, 4, and 13 will never be note blocks. But it's kind of interesting, right? Because essentially all of the blocks that you want to hit are sort of clustered around right field. Like, it would be awesome if block number 1 was also a note block. It's not. I'm pretty sure that it's metal. But what this means is, because we know what the blocks contain, we can sort of aim. You can't really aim your shots. You can aim your shots a little bit. It's pretty tricky. It's not consistent. There are things you can do. If you hold the control stick down, that tends to make your balls go higher when you hit them. If you swing late as a righty batter, like Toadette, default Toadette is a righty batter, swinging late tends to make the ball go more towards right field. So we hold the control stick down and swing late to try and reach our 5 valid targets, which are blocks 3, 8, 15, and then 9 and 10, which are also right nearby. And if we happen to hit blocks 5 or 6 by accident, that's also great. We're still good. We move on. But that's basically the best that we can do with that setup. There is another setup, and I will show it to you. This one was developed by Nooch in the midst of testing everything. So I'm not going to open Dolphin Memory Editor. You're just kind of going to have to trust me on this. But basically, Nooch looked at the list of RNG values as they appeared and looked at the way that Bowser Jr. encounters and Peach Garden maps are generated, and basically found a value relatively early on in the list where if that's the value that you have going into loading the Bowser Jr. encounter, all 8 of the variable blocks will be note blocks. Let's see, I'm trying to remember. I think it's Peach, Birdo, Donkey Kong, and then what is it? Peach, Birdo, Donkey Kong, Wario, and then stop at Wario. So that's 22 RNG calls. That's 352? 352? Advanced RNG 352 times? Yeah. This gets us close to the value that we want. Unfortunately, it's not quite as simple of a setup, though, and I'll show you why. So, we've set RNG to the correct value for starting challenge mode. And as you're about to see, this does lead to a good sort of butterfly effect, cascading random or pseudo-random events that leads to Bowser Jr. walking towards the Peach Garden area with a little bit of dillying and dallying, but not that much. Reasonably quick. He's in the gardens area now. So he's going to move around like this. He's going to go up towards the castle, but we're not close enough to the value that we want yet, so we need to dodge him. Then he's going to go say some cuss words to Toad. He's going to cuss at Toad. Okay, he's done, and that's probably it. Let's see. I can't tell if I exactly got it. I will be able to tell if it's definitely not it, depending on what the encounter is. But I will probably be batting against Bowser Jr. here. Okay, I think I got it. So. Yep, okay. So we're just going to say that I got it or got very close. Because a couple of the RNG values that are near the perfect one are also still very good. But assuming that I did everything correctly, and I think I did everything correctly, all 8 of the variable blocks are note blocks in this encounter. It took a little bit more time in terms of real time, and a little bit more time in terms of the speed run, right? Because the timer starts when you hit challenge mode. So it takes like about 20-25 seconds longer for Bowser Jr. running around on the map. It's also a little bit trickier because you need to move into Bowser Jr., right? He's going right away from the wall ball and back towards that main intersection. And you need to intercept him. Because if he moves again, if he starts movement towards another tile, he's going to call RNG too many times and you'll miss your chance. So it takes a little bit of practice, but only a little bit of practice. And once you understand what's going on, it's totally manageable to do. But now you have an encounter where, let's see, block 0 is a note block, block 1 is a note block, and 2, and 4, and 8, they're all note blocks. What more could you ask for? It literally does not get any better than that. The only thing that would make it any better is if there was a faster way to make this encounter happen. So, you know, doing the RNG manip before time starts, if we can get closer to the value that we wanted, that would mean less time calling random events in challenge mode. And also, we don't fully understand exactly how to do this, and it's also extremely imprecise, but if you rub up against NPCs while they're moving, that calls RNG extremely quickly. Like, I think a couple of times per frame, even. So you can bully the NPCs to advance RNG. It's just very difficult to do this in a manner that's consistent. I've tried to use it as a way to, like, start at a value with better Bowser Jr. movement to still get to the desired number faster. Have not figured it out yet, and it's extremely finicky. The limiting factor for this RNG manipulation, and the worst thing about it, is all of our RNG manipulation must result in Bowser Jr. walking from approximately here to approximately here. And Bowser Jr. is programmed... Oh, wait, I'm sorry, I was covering the map. But, yeah. Bowser Jr. starts, I think, here, somewhere around here. He needs to walk all the way from here to this section of the map. You can see the green grass, not the dark green grass. That's Donkey Kong's grass. And Bowser Jr. just kind of decides where he wants to go randomly. It's pure vibes. I'm gonna go right. I'm gonna go down. I'm gonna go up. He chooses which direction to move independently of where he is. He only cares about whether or not movement in a particular direction is possible. But he doesn't really care where he happens to be. He doesn't know where you are either. Your own movements have no effect on Bowser Jr. Where you are, he doesn't even take that into consideration. He's basically just rolling a dice, seeing if he can go that way, and if he can't go that way, he rolls the dice again. That's how he works. Bowser Jr.'s brain is very, very simple and easy to understand. But unfortunately, it's also very difficult to change his mind. How are the runs going? Well, I'm going to be debuting a world record in just a minute. Right now, I'm explaining how RNG works. But yeah, basically, we have 2 good ways to start the run. And Zap says this could be an alternate start for runners not yet targeting world record. I would say, given that you're only losing like 20 seconds, it's just as viable as the strat that I've been using for world record attempts, and it's more friendly. Like, in the context of Peach Monarchs or All Superstars, 20 seconds is not very much time. It's really not a large amount of time. And with these setups, it's the same amount of time every time, assuming that you're not, like, pausing the game or whatever, right? Like, it always takes you 23 seconds to encounter Bowser Jr. if you're doing RNG 96, and it's always 45 seconds if you're using RNG 352, and then going for the golden value that each developed, right? So just the fact that it's not like open-ended anymore, we were dependent on Bowser Jr. deciding to move in the ways that we liked before. Starting from RNG values that we didn't control, and it was a mess. Sometimes he would go bother Yoshi, sometimes he would refuse to leave the jungle, but we would always need him to come here. At least with these setups, Bowser Jr. is going to come to this section of the map, and then we time our encounter with him the way that we want. Just trying to get a run off the ground? No, I'm just explaining how RNG works right now. So this is a good method to have at our disposal. It's possible that more setups will be developed in the future, but the 2 that we have right now are really great. We have a very fast option. It might be the fastest option in the end. There might not be a faster way to do it. That basically gets you into the Bowser Jr. match, and you're playing baseball in 45 seconds. From power on. Or I guess it's more like 50 seconds. Or maybe a minute if you include the loading times. But yeah, from power on to baseball in 1 minute, and then you have to do a couple of plate appearances to the Toads, and then you can shoot for your note block or reset. And then we have another setup that takes about a minute longer, about 30, 45 seconds longer, somewhere around that. And instead of having 3 of the 8 blocks being note blocks, all 8 of them are note blocks. And you can aim wherever you want, and maybe you'll get lucky, and it's easier to get a run going. But you, as the potential runner, can choose which one you like to do. They both have their merits, and it's possible, yeah, that we'll have even more methods that have their own advantages. But this research has been very fruitful, and it has made doing runs of Peach Monarchs much more fun, because having to contend with Bowser Jr.'s randomness on top of the batting randomness is a lot, and now Bowser Jr. is no longer random. The batting is still random, and as I mentioned earlier, once you are in a game of baseball, RNG is advancing so many times, so quickly, that human beings, without knowledge of the game state, through an external memory editor, cannot keep up. And even if we did have an external memory editor, all we would be able to say is, damn, RNG sure is changing a lot. I wish I could help influence how many times it's changing. Oh well. But yeah, getting it down to just the batting, because at least the batting is something that we can, have some push and pull for. Can't control it, but can influence it. And with Mario Superstar Baseball for the Nintendo GameCube, sometimes influence is the best that you're going to get. So this has been a very, very long, overly detailed explanation of what we know about Bowser Jr. and Peach Garden Encounter Generation and RNG. I hope that this was interesting. I'm also going to record a shorter tutorial that just kind of gets to the point. But this game's cool, and it's cool that we understand it on a deeper level than we've ever understood it before, and managed to use that understanding to develop these cool setups that take some of the randomness out of this extremely random game.